Hey, it's Kevin. Thank you so much for coming by from the No BS social media chat. I've read a lot of articles recently with kind of a theme of, well, here's some good news about social media, or here's some bad news about social media. Now, they may not be using the exact words good news and bad news, but you get the drift. And the reality is there's a lot to talk about when it comes to social media. You know, it's hard to believe that, well, I've been working directly in social media, if not full-time, darn near full-time, for almost, 14 years? No, 13 years, 13 years. And it's been around for about 15 years. And we've seen a lot of ebb and flow. We've seen a lot of changes since the Friendster, MySpace days of social media. We've seen a lot of, I don't want to say players, we've seen a lot of participants come and go. And the one thing about social media is it continues to evolve on a regular basis. Now, there is some good news about social media. The good news is you can still build a personal brand, a business brand, a fan base, move the meter, whatever you want to call it, with social media. That's the good news. There's still a way for, I don't say for free, but cost effectively to be able to move the meter that you need to have moved. Again, whether it's selling widgets, whether it's selling, in the case of my artist, concert tickets, downloads, even some hard copies if they still exist, whatever it is. But the bad news, I don't want to say outweighs the good news, but the bad news is more not what you think, actually. The bad news is simple. It is harder to get noticed now than it was when there were less people involved. And that's the interesting thing is social media tends to, I don't want to use the word mature, but mature is a good way to put it. Here we are now a decade plus in for many people. A lot of people have been on Facebook for almost a decade. And the fan base of Facebook, the people who are regular users, have varied in age. Because what's happened is, of course, Facebook first created for college students, then it was kind of rolled out to high school students. You had to have an edu, domain name in your email address to be able to use it. And then they finally opened it up to the general public. Well, here's what happened. Adults slow to adopt. As I said, anybody over 50 is still fairly reticent for the most part to social media. They're still not used to it. They don't know if it's really worth their time. Now, it may be something as a hobby. It may be something for fun. It may be something to pass the time, but they're not really focused on using it as a business tool. Well, as more and more adults, older adults, senior citizens even, got on Facebook, the young people who drove all the activity jumped off. Because again, let's be honest, do you really want to hang around where your mom and your grandmom are? Not that they're bad people, but you don't want them to know some of those intimate details. You don't want them to see you at your real point, if you know what I mean. Now, again, we're talking just personal stuff here. Well, I think that then moved younger people to a different social network. But Facebook is still one of the biggest, most important networks. The one thing that's funny is as long as we've been doing social media, MySpace was almost 100% of the efforts early on. And then when MySpace started dying, and that was because of Facebook, you started getting more active on Facebook. And then it was Twitter and YouTube and now Instagram. And really for the last 7-8 years, there have been 4 big players in social media. Facebook, now Instagram, Twitter, and YouTube. You don't have to use all 4. You don't have to use 25% equally, but the reality is those are the big 4 players and continue to be the big 4 players. One thing I think we're going to do here in the next couple of weeks, we're going to kind of touch on each of those big 4 players, the big 4 as I call them, individually. Next week we'll talk about Facebook, then we'll talk about Instagram, then Twitter, then YouTube, and kind of devote a little time to each of them to talk about the nuances of where they're at today. Facebook's always changing their data, always changing what you can do and what you can't do. And it can be frustrating, but we'll talk about the good, the bad, and the ugly with Facebook. But the good news is social media, in spite of what critics say, is still an amazing tool if used properly. I had this discussion the other day with some business consultant, and they were asking me what I thought my strengths were when it came to social media. I said, can you tell me about a good campaign you've delivered? And I said, well, right there is your mistake. I said, it's not about campaigns. We've talked about that before. It's truly about day in, day out, building, a following, building a reputation, building a connection. Campaigns are a part of it, but I don't focus on campaigns. We focus about short-term goals, long-term goals. So the good news is you can still grow. The bad news, if you want to take it that way, it's harder to grow now than ever before. My video views today are less than what they were a year ago, even though more people are out there potentially watching, because you have more content to be able to consume. It's getting tougher and tougher to get noticed, to be visible. And that's the challenge. We'll address those challenges here in the coming weeks. A lot of good news and a lot of bad news. But if you're not fully and active and engaged in social media at this point, man, you're behind an 8 ball. Back next week, another No BS Social Media Chat. NoBSSocial.com, our website for all these videos, all hundreds upon hundreds of them. And we've been doing them every week for a few years now. As well, if you'd like to reach out to me, if you'd like to connect, my email address is coming up here at the end of the video, as is my phone number. Again, I don't care if we do it by text. I don't care if we do it by phone. I don't care if we do it by email. Whatever it is, if you want to find me on Facebook or wherever you'd like to connect, let's connect. Let's talk more about it. The more we talk, the more we converse, the better it's going to be for all of us. And that's good news. See you next week. Thanks.